The cafe's golden light spilled onto the quiet street, its windows glowing like a promise of warmth against the late afternoon chill. Inside, voices mingled with the hum of espresso machines and the clink of porcelain cups. Outside, on the other side of the glass, a girl hesitated. Her reflection looked back at her. Nervous eyes, pressed lips, and a dress that didn't quite feel like her own. It wasn't her own. It was her sister's. Amara smoothed down the fabric of the soft blue dress, feeling the unfamiliar fit against her skin. Her sister had insisted she wear it, had coaxed her into makeup and loose curls, had even hugged her before she left the small apartment they shared with their younger brother. "You'll be fine," her sister had whispered. "Just try, you deserve to be seen." But now, standing outside the cafe, Amara wasn't so sure. She wasn't the kind of girl men noticed. Not in borrowed clothes. Not with a wallet that had only enough money for bus fare home, not a penny more. Her throat tightened. What if he asked her to order something? Her palms grew clammy at the thought. She had agreed to this blind date only because her sister had pushed her. Her sister had been invited but wasn't ready, and Amara, reluctant but too soft-hearted to refuse, had been sent in her place. Just meet him, her sister had urged. You don't have to fall in love. Just give him a chance. Or at least give yourself one. Now here she was. A poor girl with nothing but honesty in her pocket. Standing outside a cafe where the air smelled like roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries she couldn't afford. She almost turned around, almost fled, but then her gaze shifted past the glass, and she saw him. He was sitting at a corner table, posture straight, hands folded over the table. A man in a charcoal, gray suit that fit like it was stitched to his frame. His hair was dark, neatly styled, and his expression, though calm, carried the quiet weight of someone used to being in control. Her breath caught. He was far more handsome than she expected. Broad shoulders, sharp jawline. A presence that seemed to draw light toward him. She clutched the strap of her worn handbag tighter, her heart racing. He's waiting for me, for a brief, foolish second. She wondered if she should just pretend she wasn't his date. He would see through her anyway. He'd realize in an instant that she didn't belong in the same world as him. But before she could step back, his eyes lifted. They met hers through the glass. Something flickered in his gaze. Recognition, curiosity, perhaps a hint of warmth, and then he smiled. Not the practiced, polite smile of a man fulfilling an obligation, but something softer. Something that made her knees weaken. Her sister's voice echoed in her memory. Just try, Amara. You deserve to be seen. With a trembling inhale, she pushed open the glass door. The bell above jingled softly, announcing her presence. Warm air embraced her as she stepped inside, the aroma of cinnamon and coffee instantly wrapping around her senses. She took one small step, then another, until she stood at the edge of his table. Amara. His voice was deep, steady, with a gentle voice she didn't expect. Her own voice nearly failed her. Why, yes. You must be Daniel. He nodded, rising slightly in his seat, as though to greet her properly. He didn't extend his hand in the polished, business-like manner she expected. Instead, he gestured to the chair across from him, as if inviting her into a space he'd kept open just for her. She sat carefully, clutching the strap of her handbag in her lap. Her eyes darted around the cafe, avoiding his gaze for fear he'd see too much. A waitress came by with a bright smile. "Good evening, can I get you both started with drinks?" Amara froze. The question she had dreaded hung heavy in the air. Her eyes flicked to the menu card neatly placed on the table. The numbers next to the drinks blurred before her eyes. A latte cost more than she had in her wallet. Even the simplest black coffee was out of reach. Her throat tightened. She could lie, pretend she wasn't thirsty, but he would know, he would notice. She had always been a terrible liar. And so, with her cheeks burning, she lowered her gaze and whispered, almost too softly to be heard, I can't afford coffee." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. She braced herself for the shift. The flicker of judgment, the awkward clearing of his throat, the polite but distant smile that would signal the end of whatever this meeting was supposed to be. But it never came. Instead, she heard something else. A low chuckle, rich and warm. Her head jerked up in surprise. He wasn't mocking her. He wasn't embarrassed. He was smiling, truly smiling, as though her words had touched something genuine in him. The waitress blinked, waiting. Daniel glanced at her and said smoothly. 2 coffees please. Black with a touch of cream. The waitress nodded and walked away. Amara stared at him, confusion swirling with relief. You didn't have to. I wanted to, he interrupted gently. His eyes held hers, steady and kind. No one should have to sit in a cafe and feel like they can't enjoy a cup of coffee. Her heart stuttered. Something about the way he said it, the ease, the lack of judgment, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. She pressed her lips together, fighting back the lump in her throat. He was a stranger, and yet, in that moment, he felt like someone who understood. And she didn't know it yet, but that simple cup of coffee would be the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was fragile, like the surface of still water, waiting to ripple. Amara sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her shoulders drawn inward, as if she was trying to take up less space. The scent of freshly ground beans floated through the cafe, and she tried to steady her heartbeat with each inhale. Daniel watched her quietly. His suit, crisp and perfectly tailored, marked him as someone from a world far from hers, yet his eyes didn't hold arrogance or boredom. They were steady, curious, and, most surprisingly, gentle. Have you been here before? He asked, breaking the silence with a tone that carried no pressure, only genuine interest. She shook her head. No, I don't usually come to places like this. Her voice faltered at the edges, betraying her nerves. Too crowded? He asked, tilting his head slightly. She hesitated, then gave the truth. Too expensive. The words slipped out before she could catch them. A flush crept up her neck and into her cheeks. Why did I say that? Her sister had warned her. Don't talk about money, don't talk about your struggles, just try to be normal for once. But Amara's normal wasn't polished. It wasn't hidden behind practiced smiles. It was this, raw unfiltered honesty that often made people uncomfortable. Daniel didn't flinch. He leaned back slightly, folding his arms loosely, studying her as though she had just revealed something important. Too expensive, he repeated softly, almost as though testing the words. Then, to her surprise, he smiled again. I understand. Her brows furrowed. You do. Of course. He said simply. Life isn't always about being able to afford things. Sometimes it's about having someone to share them with. Before she could respond, the waitress returned, placing 2 steaming cups of coffee on the table. The aroma was rich, earthy, comforting. Amara stared at the cup before her, her stomach tightening. She had never sat across from a man like him, sipping coffee she couldn't pay for. She felt like an imposter in her sister's dress, with her chipped nail polish and hands rough from washing dishes at the diner. Her fingers hovered above the cup, hesitant. I can pay you back later. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Why would you? Because, she swallowed, ashamed. Because it feels wrong, sitting here, drinking something I didn't earn. He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but steady, like a reassurance she didn't know she needed. Amara, it's just coffee. You don't owe me anything. Her lips parted, but no words came. She was used to people expecting something in return, favors, obligations, invisible debts that weighed heavier than the thing itself. His refusal to let her feel small was both confusing and strangely comforting. Tell you what, he added with a playful glint in his eye. If you really feel like you owe me, then just let me enjoy this coffee with good company. That's more than enough repayment. The heat in her cheeks deepened, though this time it wasn't just embarrassment. Something in his tone, casual yet sincere, unraveled the tension coiled in her chest. She picked up the cup with both hands, bringing it to her lips. The coffee was hot, slightly bitter, but grounding. She blew softly across the surface, stealing a glance at him. He was already sipping his, watching her over the rim of his cup with a look that made her pulse race. Better? He asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. For a few moments, they drank in silence. Around them, the cafe bustled, friends chatting over lattes, laptops open with the glow of deadlines, the barista calling out names. But at their small corner table, it felt like a different world. Daniel set his cup down, resting his hand casually on the table. So, he said, tell me about yourself. The words froze her in place. She hated that question. People always expected polished answers, where you studied, what you did for work, what your hobbies were. But her reality. Dropping out of college because she couldn't afford tuition. Working two part-time jobs to keep the lights on at home. Falling asleep most nights too exhausted to dream. Her instinct screamed to deflect, but something about his steady gaze made lying impossible. I work at a diner, she said softly. And I do a little sewing on the side, alterations, repairs, that sort of thing. Daniel didn't laugh, didn't scoff. His face didn't even flicker. He nodded slowly. That sounds like hard work. She blinked. You think so, of course, he said. Work that keeps people fed, clothed, it's valuable, more than most people realize. His sincerity in his voice unsettled her. Most men she had met on rare dates before had dismissed her as sweet but too simple. Someone to pity, not admire. But here he was, speaking as if her late nights hemming skirts and early mornings serving coffee were worthy of respect. Her chest tightened, and before she could stop herself, the truth slipped out again. I didn't even want to come here today. His brows rose slightly, though not in offense, more in curiosity. Why not? Because I knew, she whispered, her voice barely audible, that I couldn't even afford coffee. And what kind of girl shows up to a date like that? Her eyes dropped, staring at her hands as shame washed over her. But then she heard his chair shift. When she looked up, she saw he had leaned closer, his gaze unwavering. The kind of girl, he said softly, who values honesty over pretense, and that's rarer than you think. Her breath caught. The warmth in his tone, the steady kindness in his eyes, it disarmed her completely. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to apologize for who she was. She sat back slowly, her grip on the coffee cup loosening as her heart began to calm. Perhaps this wasn't going to be the disaster she feared. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of something she had never dared hope for. The coffee cups had gone half cold, forgotten in the warmth of the conversation that had bloomed between them. What started as short, hesitant answers had grown into longer sentences, then into stories. Threads of honesty weaving between two people who were strangers an hour ago, yet already felt like something more. Amara found herself leaning forward, her elbows resting lightly on the table. Her hands animated as she spoke. For once, she wasn't measuring every word, calculating how it might sound, or shrinking her life down into a palatable version for someone else's comfort. I get up before sunrise most days, she said with a faint smile, to make breakfast for my brother before school. Then I go straight to the diner. The morning rush is, well, it's a lot. People aren't exactly patient when they haven't had their coffee yet. Daniel chuckled at that, a low, genuine sound that seemed to settle in her chest. I can imagine. I've seen what happens when my staff don't get their caffeine on time. It's chaos. She tilted her head, curious. Your staff? For the briefest second, something flickered in his eyes, a hesitation, but then he smoothed it away with a casual shrug. I manage a team. Office work, mostly. She accepted the answer without pressing, not realizing the truth was far bigger than he was letting on. What about after the diner? He asked, leaning in. Amara hesitated, then smiled ruefully. That's when the sewing starts. It's not much. Just patching up old jeans, fixing hems, sometimes altering dresses for neighbors. My hands are always sore by the end of the night. Daniel glanced at her fingers, as though seeing them for the first time, not just as delicate hands resting on the table, but as hands that worked, created, sustained. That's a gift, he said quietly. She laughed softly, shaking her head. A gift. It's survival. I do what I can to keep things running at home. My sister's studying, my brother's still in school. Someone has to keep food on the table. There was no bitterness in her tone, only quiet strength. But still, Daniel's chest tightened as he listened. He had sat across countless business partners, lawyers, investors, all of them speaking in polished tones about ambition, profit, success. But this girl, this poor girl with honesty in her eyes, spoke about sacrifice as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Do you ever do something just for yourself? He asked gently. Her lips parted, but no words came. She sat back, caught off guard by the question. No one had ever asked her that before. After a long pause, she said softly, no, not really. I don't have the luxury to. The Daniel's gaze lingered on her, heavy with something unspoken. He wanted to tell her she deserved more. that the world was unfair to demand so much of someone with such a tender spirit, but instead, he reached for his cup and took a slow sip, letting the silence settle between them. It was she who broke it, her curiosity flickering to life. "What about you? What's your life like?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He didn't want to scare her away with the truth, not yet. He didn't want her to see the wealth, the power, the title of CEO and let it build a wall between them. So he gave her a piece of the truth, the part that mattered most. "I have a son," he said. Her eyes widened, then softened. "You're a father." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "He's 6. Smart, stubborn, endlessly curious. He keeps me on my toes more than anyone else in my life." The warmth in his voice when he spoke about his child surprised her. Most men she knew barely managed to talk about responsibility, let alone embrace it with pride. "That's..." She smiled, genuine and unguarded. "That's beautiful." Daniel's chest stirred at her reaction. No judgment, no hesitation, just quiet admiration. He leaned back, his expression softening. "It's not easy, being a single parent. Some days I feel like I'm failing. But then he'll laugh at something simple. Or run to me after school, and I remember why it's worth it." Amara felt her heart swell. She had grown used to men who measured worth in paychecks and possessions. But here was a man who measured it in laughter, in love, in the small but powerful presence of a child. "You're doing more than most would," she said, her voice certain. "That makes you more than enough." For a moment, their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, a thread of understanding that connected two lives shaped by responsibility, sacrifice, and quiet strength. Then, unexpectedly, they both laughed. It started small. At some clumsy joke about how coffee was the only thing keeping them upright in life, but then it grew. Their laughter spilled over like a release, drawing curious glances from other tables. Amara covered her mouth, trying to quiet herself, while Daniel simply leaned back, his head tilted slightly, watching her with a smile that reached his eyes. "You know," he said once the laughter ebbed, "I didn't expect this." "Expect what?" she asked, her cheeks still warm from laughing. "To feel comfortable. So quickly." His tone was quiet, almost vulnerable. Amara's smile softened. "Me, neither." For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about bills waiting at home, or the sewing pile stacked on her chair, or the ache in her back from long shifts at the diner. For the first time, she was just there. Present. Seen. And Daniel, who had walked into this blind date expecting another shallow conversation, another evening of polite smiles and empty small talk, found himself leaning closer, wanting to know more. The cafe buzzed around them, but they were lost in their own world. A poor girl who had nothing but sincerity, and a single dad CEO who had everything but trust. Neither of them realized it yet. But fate had quietly begun to tie their lives together, one honest word and one shared laugh at a time. The cafe's glow had dimmed slightly as evening settled outside, the chatter thinning as customers came and went. Amara barely noticed the passing time. She hadn't expected to laugh this much, or to feel so light. The heaviness she carried every day seemed to loosen, little by little, as she spoke with Daniel. He was easy to talk to. Not because he pried, but because he listened. Really listened. She had never met a man so present, who leaned forward with his elbows resting on the table, eyes steady. As though every word she said mattered. For a moment she forgot who she was. The poor girl in her sister's borrowed dress, with only a few coins in her purse. She forgot about her rough hands, her patched-up shoes, her tiredness. She was just Amara, and he was just Daniel. Until the moment the illusion shattered. It happened so quickly. A young man in a crisp white shirt and black apron appeared near their table. His eyes lit up when he saw Daniel. "Good evening," the barista greeted warmly, his voice carrying. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." Daniel's smile faltered ever so slightly, a hint of surprise flickering across his features. "Good evening, Mark," he replied smoothly, his tone courteous but tinged with something unspoken. Amara blinked. "Mr. Hale." The name rolled through her mind like a jolt of electricity. She glanced around the cafe. She had noticed earlier how the staff seemed unusually attentive. How they gave small nods and quick smiles whenever Daniel passed a glance their way. She had thought it was just because he was handsome, polite, someone who naturally drew attention. But now, with the title hanging in the air, pieces began to shift into place. The barista hesitated, glancing at Amara before turning back to Daniel. "If you need anything, sir, please don't hesitate to let us know." With a respectful nod, he walked away. Amara's chest tightened. She stared at Daniel, her mind racing. Mr. Hale. The name wasn't unfamiliar. She had overheard it before, on the news, in hushed conversations at the diner. Hale Enterprises. The powerful CEO who owned half the city's properties, businesses, and investments. A man whose signature could change futures. Her throat went dry. This couldn't be him. Could it? She stared at him harder, noticing things she had ignored earlier. The way his suit wasn't just well fitted but exquisitely tailored. The subtle confidence in his posture, the ease with which he carried himself. His watch, understated but clearly expensive. It all screamed wealth. Power. Status. Her stomach dropped. "You." Her voice wavered. "You." Daniel's jaw tightened. He held her gaze, his silence confirming what she dreaded. The world seemed to tilt. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. She pushed her chair back slightly, needing air space, anything to escape the sudden pressure crushing her lungs. "You're the CEO," she whispered, her voice breaking. "All this time, you let me sit here, talking about sewing clothes and scraping by. And you." She shook her head, her words tangled in shame. "I don't belong here." Her hands trembled as she reached for her bag. She couldn't sit there any longer, not under the weight of his truth. "Amara, wait." His voice was calm, but urgent. He reached out across the table, his hand hovering just above hers, not quite touching, as if afraid she'd pull away. She did. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood, her breath coming too fast. Every insecurity she had buried beneath their ladder clawed back to the surface. He was wealthy, powerful, untouchable. She was poor, invisible, fragile. This was a mistake. She whispered, her voice shaking. "I shouldn't have come. I'm sorry." She turned toward the door, her vision blurring. The cafe, once warm and safe, now felt suffocating, every pair of eyes heavy on her as if they knew she didn't belong. But before she could take another step, Daniel rose. His chair scraped back, firm and deliberate. His presence was suddenly at her side, tall and commanding. Yet his voice when he spoke, was soft. "You think I care about money?" he asked. She froze, her back still half turned to him. He stepped closer, lowering his tone so only she could hear. "Amara, I didn't come here tonight as a CEO. I came here as a man. Just a man who wanted to meet someone real." Her breath hitched. "I didn't hide who I was to deceive you," he continued gently. "I just wanted, for once, not to be seen as a title. Not to be measured by wealth, or power, or what I can buy. I wanted to be seen the way you've seen me tonight." Amara's grip tightened on her bag strap. She wanted to believe him, but her fears screamed louder. "People like you don't choose people like me." Daniel's chest ached at the rawness in her voice. He reached out then, slowly, carefully, and this time his hand brushed against hers. Warm, steady, real. "You're wrong," he said softly, firmly. "Because sitting here tonight, with you, has been more real than anything I've experienced in years." Her eyes stung. She wanted to argue. To push him away before he could hurt her, but the sincerity in his gaze made her falter. He wasn't looking at her with pity, or amusement, or obligation. He was looking at her as if she mattered. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. The cafe door loomed just a few steps away, its little brass bell ready to jingle if Amara pushed it open. She stood frozen, torn between the safety of escape and the terrifying pull of his words. Behind her Daniel's voice carried, steady but tender. "Amara," he said, her name soft on his lips. "Don't walk away. Please." Her fingers tightened on her bag strap, her knuckles white. She had told herself she wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of him. But her heart ached as though it were splitting in two. "You don't understand," she whispered, still facing the door. "You have everything. Power, respect, money, a life people like me could never dream of. And her voice broke. "I don't even have enough for a cup of coffee." Daniel's footsteps sounded against the wooden floor, measured and slow, until his presence was close behind her. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, but he didn't reach out. He didn't try to trap her. His restraint made her chest tighten even more. "I don't want someone with everything," he said quietly. I want someone real. Someone honest. Someone who can sit across from me and admit she can't afford coffee, instead of pretending she can. Her breath caught. He stepped just close enough that his voice wrapped around her, calm and steady. Do you know how rare that is in my world? People tell me what they think I want to hear. They chase my money, my name. But you've only shown me yourself. And that's worth more than anything I could buy. Amara turned slowly, her eyes glistening. She searched his face, waiting for the insincerity, the crack in his mask. The moment she'd realized this was all some cruel joke. But it never came. His gaze was steady, raw, and unguarded. I'm not asking you to step into my world. Daniel continued, lowering his voice. I'm asking you to let me step into yours. To share it with you. To earn a place in your life, not with money, but with something real. Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, desperately. But fear coiled inside her like a serpent. And what happens when you realize I can't give you what others can? When you see that I'm just a girl barely holding her family together. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing hers. This time, she didn't pull away. Then I'll hold you together, he said simply. Because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, maybe. But I know what it means to carry more than you should. And I don't want you to do it alone anymore. Oh, her throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her. Not her relatives, not past suitors, not anyone. She had always been the one to give, to hold, to sacrifice. The idea of someone choosing to hold her was almost unbearable. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She covered her face with her hands. Ashamed of breaking down, but Daniel gently lowered them, his touch careful, reverent. Look at me, Amara, he murmured. She did. Through her tears, she saw not the CEO, not the man the world admired and feared, but a father, a man, someone who carried his own scars yet still chose to stand tall. Someone who saw her, not her poverty, not her flaws but her heart. His thumb brushed away one of her tears. I don't care about status. I don't care about money. I care about the woman sitting in front of me, who has more courage and strength than anyone I've ever met. Her lips trembled. Daniel. He smiled then, a soft, almost boyish smile that contrasted so sharply with his sharp suit and commanding aura. So let me ask you, not as a CEO, but as a man, can I see you again? The cafe around them seemed to fade. The barista wiping down counters, the low hum of background music, the faint clatter of cups. In that moment, the world shrank to just the two of them, standing on the fragile edge of something new. Amara's chest heaved with emotion. She wanted to say no, to protect herself, to retreat into the safety of the life she knew. But her heart, reckless and aching, whispered yes. And when she met his eyes, steady and unwavering, she realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of being seen. She nodded, a trembling smile breaking through her tears. Yes, you can. Relief flooded his features and his smile widened. Not triumphant, not victorious, but grateful. He lifted her hand gently, pressing it to his chest, right over his heartbeat. Then this is just the beginning. Amara laughed softly through her tears, the sound fragile but real. The weight on her shoulders didn't vanish, but it felt lighter. As if she no longer had to carry it alone. Daniel reached for his wallet and left bills on the table. But Amara noticed something. He didn't do it with the careless arrogance of a man flaunting wealth. He did it quietly. Simply, as though money was the least important thing in that room. As they stepped out into the evening air, the streetlights flickering to life above them, Daniel offered his arm. She hesitated only a second before slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. The night was cool, but Amara felt warm. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't walking alone. And though she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, one thing was certain: this blind date, born out of nerves and honesty, and a single cup of coffee, had changed both of their lives forever.